So this week's objective, and we didn't get a chance to spend any time on it on Tuesday because we wanted to review and make sure that everybody was clear for the quiz and all of the other things that were going on, is that we were talking about deontological ethics and Immanuel Kant. That's going to be our focus for today. And I really want us to really kind of understand what this whole theory is about. Immanuel Kant is the theory that talks about deontological ethics. And as you might have read through your understanding, Immanuel Kant is another theorist that talks about basically this view of significance of personal autonomy. When you think about Immanuel Kant has a different perspective than some of the others that we have been looking at. He was actually born, he's a German-born philosopher, born in the 1700s. And he's regarded as a central figure in our modern philosophy. Immanuel Kant, or Kant theory, that oftentimes you'll hear. Some people say Kant, other people say Kant. You know, it does not matter how you pronounce it, but it's most people will pronounce it as Kant. And basically, in the Tuskegee experiment, and many of you all have probably heard about the Tuskegee experiment, but for those of you who've not, it was in your reading, but also just to kind of give us a framework. Between 1932 and 1972, unfortunately, there were experiments that were conducted in Tuskegee, Alabama, and they utilized 390 poor and illiterate African-American men who had syphilis, and followed in order to determine the progress of their disease, whether it was always fatal and how it spread. Now, interesting enough, during this time, during the Tuskegee experiment, there was the development of antibiotics to be able to cure syphilis, but they did not administer to any of those who were still living at the time in this experimentation, because they were still doing this longitudinal study. And so there were men who still died and suffered greatly, even though there was a known substance to be able to give them life and to give them a cure. And this, it was very illegal to do. Utilitarian thinking, based upon what we studied on last week, according to utilitarians, the Tuskegee experiments could perhaps be justifiable. Remember, because we talked about if harm is done to the participants were minimum, and the study had no negative effects, and if knowledge was gained was valuable, that reduced overall suffering, because remember, it was only 390 men that were involved in that, then the study might be justifiable, right? The greatest amount of happiness for the greatest amount of people. They found out information that would be helpful. Utilitarians would say, hey, you know, not bad. It's, you know, it's information gained. However, Nuremberg experiments during World War II, there were a number of German physicians who conducted painful and awfully deadly experiments on thousands of Jewish prisoners without their permission. During that World War, when they basically herded, you know, thousands and thousands of Jews and had them as prisoners, they basically conducted all these very painful and deadly experiments on them and did them in inhumane conditions with the lack of consent and questionable research standards. Modern scientists overwhelmingly reject the results of the experiments in the camps. And much like the Tuskegee experiments, even though there was a permission as a sort that was given of those 390 men, because they were given money to participate in that, they were illiterate, so they did not know what they were reading. They were, ignorant because they did not explain to them fully what was going to go on. And they took advantage of them, just like they were taking advantage of these Jews who were prisoners in a camp. And then they did these horrible things, horrific things, that they did learn a lot from these experiments. But the voluntary consent of human subjects is absolutely essential. That is why today, if you guys are doing any type of research, you do a quantitative or you do a qualitative study today, you have to have a voluntary consent from those who are participating in those studies. If you were a part of a study today, a medical study, any kind of study today, you have to have consent that has to be explained. It has to be informed and uncoerced. There has to be less than $1 amount that would be tempting to a person to participate. And it has to be implied in a principle that people are autonomous and their autonomy ought to be respected and protected, even if this means that they cannot do certain types of research and cannot therefore discover valuable information. This had to be developed because of the Nuremberg Code. Whenever you do an experiment, if you decide to participate in a study where they say, we're looking for so many people who have diabetes to participate in the study, or the certain kind of cancer to participate in the study, it has to be an informed consent. Everyone has to understand what the risks are involved. They have to understand that if there's any compensation that's involved, it has to be so little that they do not feel that they are coerced into being a part of that. In other words, it cannot be so much that I feel like I have to do this in order to support my family. Any questions so far about this? Okay, carrying on. Based upon Nuremberg Code, the rule of voluntary consent is the respect of autonomy of research subjects. And the Tuskegee experiments were immoral because they produced, even though they produced valuable information for those who were able to do from scientists going forth. And so the key in this is autonomy when you're talking about Kant's philosophy. One, what can I know? And what ought I do? So again, when you're talking about Kant's moral philosophy, very different than ethical relativism, very different than utilitarianism. It's what can I know and what ought I do? So when Kant's theory of knowledge is important and influential, our concern is his moral philosophy. Are you all following yet? What can I know and what ought I do? What can I know and what ought I do? So when you think about this, what can I know implies what can I know about this and what should I do? What ought I do about this? That is Kant's moral philosophy. So Immanuel Kant's theory is that there's an emphasis on personal autonomy. There's an emphasis on personal autonomy. There was no personal autonomy in the Tuskegee experiments. There was no personal autonomy in the Nuremberg experiments because prisoners of war were not given the autonomy to say no. The Tuskegee experiments, they were ignorantly involved in a program that were really literally causing them to die when they did not have to die. The emphasis on personal autonomy and the idea that people ought not to be used as they were in the Tuskegee experiments are central tenets to the moral philosophy of Immanuel Kant. So Kant also maintains that there are certain things we ought not do, even if these things would produce the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. There's just some things that we just should not do because people should have personal autonomy. And so Kant's theory would support that people ought not to be used because what, again, going back to this idea, what can I know? What can I know should only come from voluntary consent. What ought I do should only be based upon people doing what they understand that they're participating in a fair way. Okay, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so as we look at, the philosophy of Kant, and we continue to look at, the way that he presents his philosophy, let's look a little further at his tenets. Deontological or deontology and the ethics of duty is that Kant's theory of ethics is best described as deontological theory. It is the deontology, which means the theory of duty. So when you talk about deontological ethics, it focuses on these three things. It focuses on our duties, our obligations, and rights. Because remember, it's what I ought to do. So deontological ethics focuses on duties, obligations, and rights. What are the duties that I have to mankind, to the environment, to the world? What are my obligations that I have to myself, to the people around me? And what are rights? What are the rights that mankind has? What do we have that we owe to one another? What do we have that we owe to animals, to the environment? What do we owe to one another? So again, deontological ethics focuses on duties, obligations, and rights. So when we best describe this, deontological idea is the theory of duty, and deontological ethics focuses on duties, obligations, and rights. So I'm going to go back here for again. The emphasis on personal autonomy and the idea that people ought not be used as they were in Tuskegee experiments, as they were in the Nuremberg experiments, is that main philosophy of Immanuel Kant, right? That there are certain things that we ought not do, even if these things would produce, as utilitarians would say, the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. So in deontological study, or the ethics of duty, remember, theory of duty, are going to focus on three things: duties, obligations, and rights. Duties, obligations, and rights. All right. So deontological was coined by Jeremy Bentham. You all remember Jeremy Bentham? Where do we remember Jeremy Bentham from?
He was with Mill.
Yes, utilitarians. Very
Yeah,
good.
utilitarian with yeah, with him.
Yeah.
I can't say the word, but you know what I meant.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So the term deontological was actually coined by the utilitarian Jeremy Bentham, who was described it as knowledge of what is right or proper. And Bentham thought that deontological points to the direction of the principle of utility. And again, remember the theory of duty. We have a duty, and for utilitarians, their duty is to the greatest happiness, to the greatest amount of people. But Kant believes that these are the things that we ought to do for, what I need to know, right? And what I ought to do. So I have to think about those things that I have to do. But there are three things that really describe the ontological portions. There were three things that we talked about just a few minutes ago. And so you get another chance to put into the chart directly to me, direct message, what are those three things that are deontological principles, ethics? Go on and put it, well, those three things. Go ahead and put it in your chat. And I'm going to go on and pause the recording. And because we still have a little bit to cover. So one of the things that Kant does, in contrast to our philosophy that we find in utilitarianism, is what is the right motive? And we talked about right motive, act, and consequences. We've talked about that since almost the beginning of class. But what is the right motive? According to Kant, he believes that there is an act, that an act has a moral worth only if it's done with the right intention or motive. Now, remember when we were talking about Mill feels like, it doesn't matter why you do what you do. If you did it for celebrity, remember we talked about that on Monday. If you did it for celebrity, if you did it for money, if you did it for moral intent, it didn't matter as long as you did the right thing. Remember we were talking about saving that person? But Kant believes that an act has moral worth only if it's done with a right intention or motive. So having the right intention means doing what is right, or what one believes is to be right, just because it is right. So in Kant's words, it's an act out of duty, out of concern, and out of respect for the moral law. Kant is not a relativist. He believes that there is a right and a wrong thing to do. whether or not we know it or agree about it. So it's very different than ethical relativism. And it's very different than utilitarianism, because Kant believes that there is a moral right and wrong thing to do. And it's whether or not you know it or whether or not you agree with it, there is always a moral right or wrong thing to do. And that a moral worth is done with a right intention or motive. But the key for this is that it's to act out of duty, out of concern, and out of respect for the moral law. So in Kant's thinking, there is an established moral law. And having right intentions mean doing what is right or what one believes is right just because it is right. Are you following me so far?
Yeah, from what I've heard. But I can always go back on your YouTube to get that little part.
Are the rest of you following me so far? Because I know this is Thursday, so just want to make sure that we're here, because this is a very important part of understanding Kant's theory. And without understanding that, we really can't move any further. So are we at least halfway clear here?
Somewhat. I have to go back to look at it again. So I'm just being honest.
Well, then let's go
So-
back again. Kant believed that there is an act that has moral worth only if you do it with the right intention or motive.
Okay,
So-
never mind. I get that part. All right. I
Okay,
get it.
that
I get
part,
that. Yes.
you're good on that part. Okay.
Yes.
The next part of it is, once you have the right intention, according to Kant, means doing what is right or what you believe one believes is right, just because it's the right thing to do. So in other words, if you believe that it is the right thing to do to give to charity, to help people who are homeless, and even though you may not know whether or not that charity is properly affixing those funds to those people appropriately, because you thought it was the right thing to do, it is right according
Okay.
to Kant's
And I his theory thing now. I understand it.
Okay, great. So it's out of duty and it's out of respect to the moral law. Kant is not a relativist. He believes wholeheartedly that there is a black and white, there is a right and there is a wrong thing to do. Unlike ethical relativism, who believes that there are all kinds of grays and blues and yellows and all that other stuff. Kant believes there is a black and a white, right and a wrong. And whether or not you know it, or whether or not you agree about it, there is a moral right or wrong.
I think about like Steve Urkel. Everything he did, it was really out of him doing it he thought it was the right thing to do, and everybody blamed him because it went wrong, but his intentions were really good and he was thinking of others. So that's how I'm understanding his view right now, his theory right now. So
Okay, that's good. Any other questions or comments regarding what is the right motive? Have you met people like this who have a perfectly straight-laced, black and white, There is no gray in their lives, right or wrong mindset.
My auntie,
Okay.
she's a principal, but her, like, she's just straightforward like that. She feel like it's just her, period. I'm just gonna keep it like that. I ain't about to go in that.
Okay. When you believe that this is a right or wrong thing, there is no middle ground. There is no compromise when it comes to the right motive. This is the way that it is. So this brings us to what your book talks about. And this is the concept that will help us to understand Kant's motive through the shopkeeper's motive, okay? So let's look at this. That's why I have it on the screen, even as I talk it through. This is scenario one. The shopkeeper's motive or reason for acting might be because it's good business to practice or charge the same to all. So let me start with this. Now, the shopkeeper motive is all about making sure in an economy where people are hurting, like now, a recession, where people are hurting. And the shopkeeper at this point is making some changes in their shop to make sure that their customers have different types of prices to be able to accommodate their customers. So scenario one, the shopkeeper's motive or reason for acting might be because it's a good business practice to charge the same to all their customers. It is in her best self-interest that she do this because not necessarily wrong, this motive is not praiseworthy. So say, for instance, she decides that she's going to put bread, every bread that she has in her shop for $2, okay? Instead of it being $3 and $4 that you might see in your supermarket right now, all of her bread is going to be $2 each, okay? But scenario one, Kant would say that the shopkeeper's motive or reason for acting might be because it's a good business practice to charge everyone the same to all, that it's in her own best interest that she do this, putting all the bread, all of them, all the brands, $2. And although it's not necessarily wrong, this motive is not praiseworthy, okay? The reason why it's not praiseworthy because it says it's a good practice to charge everyone the same, because I might be able to afford $3 bread, and Dominique might be able to afford $3 bread, and Yasmin might be able to afford $3 bread, and Janine might be able to afford $3 bread, but Diane out here, she can't afford anything at all. And so she's struggling to just pay $2 for that. And so she's charging everybody the same, but she's charging everyone the same because it's good business practice, rather than her escalating a price for us who could afford $3, as opposed to, putting a sale down for Diane out here who can barely afford the $2. So in his mind, Kant's theory would say her motive is not praiseworthy. Why isn't her account praiseworthy? Because in his thinking, it's not necessarily wrong for her to do it, but it's a good business practice for her. Number two, the shopkeeper might charge a fair and equal price because she is sympathetic toward her customers and naturally inclined to do them good. Kant said that this motive is not the highest either, because we do not have high moral esteem or praise for people who simply do what they feel like doing, even if we believe that they're doing the right thing. Now,
I'm sorry, excuse me, Professor. What did you say the second lady said that then he said that cannot be right either?
Yeah, the second thing is the shopkeeper, so the first scenario is good business practice, she's charging the same to all, okay? The second scenario is that the shopkeeper might charge a fair and equal price because she's sympathetic toward all of her customers, because it's a recession. And so because she's sympathetic to all of us, she's inclined to do us good. Kant would say that this is not the highest motive of morality either, because we do not have high moral esteem and praise for people who simply do what they feel like doing, even if we believe that we're doing the right thing. So he's saying that it's not a high praise for the shopkeeper who's just sympathetic to their customers, just like it's not to be praised because she had good business practices. Because in his mind, or Kant's theory, is that that's not the highest motive because of your sympathy toward the customer. But number three is, if the shopkeeper did the right thing just because she believed it was right, and she lowered all of the prices down to $2. However, then this act would be based upon the highest motive. We do have special respect or even moral reverence for people who act out of the will to do the right thing, especially when it comes to a great cost to themselves. Because remember, it's still costing her $4 for the bread, but she's reducing it down to $2, not because it's good business practice in number one, not because she's feeling sympathetic to her customers in number two, but number three, because it's the right thing to do, which he would consider the highest motive. So the act is only moral worthy when it is motivated by the concern for moral law, according to Kant. Are you confused? You can say so if you are. Let's get on.
I'm not confused. I'm getting what you're saying. I think I just have to go back and read the scenario myself and understand it better. But okay. I'm just gathering things, so I just have you in the ear. That's all. It caught me the second thing that you just said. But I'm sort of understanding it, but yeah, I just have to read it myself and then hear your voice with it to really, the scenarios that you said, because I don't think it's good business that she's paying $4 and it's $2. I would have said, you know, she's compassionate, but you said that wasn't it either.
Yes.
That it was number 3.
So according to Kant, he does not believe that what we ought to do is we ought to act at our highest motive to do what is right simply because it's right. Not because it's going to be a good business practice, which is in number 1 scenario, not because she's sympathetic to what's going on in the recession of what's happening for people out there in scenario number 2, but she should make her decision and she should act on what is right just because it is black and white, it's the right thing to do. That is considered the highest motive of morality, according to Kant. That you
because you said it's black and white. That's the main
right.
key to all that. Gotcha.
Right, that you're doing the right thing for the right reason because it's the right thing to do. Not because you're sympathetic, not because it's good business practice, but because it's the right thing to do in moral law. What would be another example of that? Trying to think of the most, okay. Back in when we were dealing with the pandemic and the beginning of the pandemic, and people were beginning to lose their jobs, and there was no more circulation into our economy. People stopped buying, people were living at home. They were not deciding to do anything related to contributing to the economy. The country decided to send out checks to people so that they could pay their rent, that they could buy food, those kinds of things. The action could have been interpreted as political theater that says, hey, we're the good guys, we're sending you a check because, we got an election coming up and vote for us again. That wouldn't be considered praiseworthy. Nor would it be, we feel sorry for you guys, so here's a little money, you poor people, here you go, right? The thing that would be the right thing to do is that everyone should have gotten a check, according to Kant, because right is right. If the economy needed to be contributed to, everyone should have gotten a check.
Just like everyone should be able to get food stamps, rich, poor,
exactly.
Everybody should be able to get it.
Exactly.
But the economy, the politics, don't look at it like that. I think if everybody got the same thing, we would be all on the same page. But the rich try to stay rich and keep the poor poor. And the middle class is just stuck in between.
And so Kant would be with you in terms of the respect of what you believe what is right is that's the highest motive. So you cannot offshoot or say that the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest amount of people. You cannot, offshoot a group of people. You cannot say that these are these gray points. It's right is right, wrong is wrong, either for all or for nothing. This is the right thing to do, the moral law. So
wait, quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So you just said that wouldn't be, counting for the greater good. So that would be the utilitarian, right? That would be the utilitarian.
Yes,
person.
You got it.
Okay, all right. And his specific word for the Kant theory would be the deological. How do we say it? The
Deontological.
deontological. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm in right. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
So with this is that for Kant, the highest motive should be doing things that are right just because they're right, which means that if it was right for Yasmin, it's right for Jeannie. If it's right for Dominique, it's right for Yvette. It's right for everyone. There is not a wrong, right for us and then a wrong for someone else. It should be the highest standard of moral law. So it should be right for everyone. Okay?
Comment, question, comment, I don't know.
Yeah.
But wouldn't everybody's like, I guess, highest thought maybe be like different? Like, for example,
that is one of the problems of Kant's theory. So thank you. We're going to get to that.
I'm like, because like with the link and with the checks, I mean, if you're rich, why would you need more money? That's kind of like the epitome of the rich trying to get richer because you want more money and you be like, you're good. Like, obviously I need the link or the, to like try to get on my feet, but I don't want to stay here forever.
Mm-hmm. I'm loving how you're thinking, because that is one of the problems of Kant's theory, and we're going to talk about that. Because Kant, the ability to act for moral reasons or motives, Kant believes that one part of what gives human beings dignity and worth, that the ability to act for moral reasons or motives is what gives human beings dignity and worth. And so what is the right thing to do? Going back to our motive, act, consequences. To understand Kant's theory, we have to examine the difference between what he calls hypothetical imperative and categorical imperative. Again, we have to examine the difference between hypothetical imperative and categorical imperative.
I was just reading about that. That's when I said the non-moral and the moral.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
So it is Kant's test for what is right or wrong is this categorical imperative. So that first form is act only on the maxim that you will as universal law. And by maxim, Kant means a description of action or policy that I can put to a test. I need only to formulate some kind of maxim or rule and ask whether or not I could will that everyone would follow that maxim. And this is where that comes back to where you were talking about, Dominique, whether or not this is something that everyone can follow, right? Kant's basic moral principle, the categorical imperative, is the principle of fairness. I should not do what I am not able to will that everyone do. This is that principle of categorical imperative. This principle of fairness that I should not do what I am not able to will that everyone do. So that first form of Kant's categorical imperative requires universalizing one's contemplated action or policy. So in other words, in order for Kant to think about moral law, he believes that there has to be a maxim or a test to determine whether or not his moral theory can be followed in this principle of fairness. And so is it what I'm asking you to do, can everyone do it? That's the categorical imperative. Am I asking you to do something that everyone, am I asking you in this moral code, am I putting this to the test? Am I asking you something that everyone can truly follow? Is it something in the principle of fairness that I should not do what I am not able to will that everyone do? I should not do what I am not able to will that everyone does. So if it's not something that I know that universally can be done by every person in the world, then it does not meet the categorical imperative.
I think everyone, I'm not talking about money. I think everyone can take a toll when it comes to food. Everyone. That's a least worry, rich, poor, middle, whoever has to worry about when it comes to food. Ever going out, not having food, regardless, whatever. I think everyone can benefit from that, my opinion.
Say more, Yasmin.
What else?
According to this categorical imperative, what moral law would you put in place that you think that everyone should follow regarding this food?
Let me think of that yet. Can you let me think about it?
Yeah.
Come back. Okay.
Anybody else want to give a shot at a categorical imperative, a universal law that everyone can do? A test for right and wrong.
It's hard to think about because it's like you can have so many different ways to look at a situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like hard for every single person outside of just living and breathing air. That's the only thing where like you can just, well, you gotta breathe.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, it makes you think about it, because think about the laws that they put into effect and the things we actually ask for when we go vote. And now that this question was asked to us on the rim, like on the spot, it's like, wait, how can I put this law to effect? And if I'm saying this, yes, I want everybody to be able to have food and not be able to pay for it. But it's still, in reality, it has to be a benefit from it. You get, like, it has to be a benefit from it. So either if we're all growing it to be able to trade instead of having to pay for something that should be free, because this was given to us. It's plants, it's animals that's growing. I'm trying to think how I would put it on paper if I had to bring it to the courts to put this into law. If that's what you're asking, how will we put that into law?
And you don't even have to put it into law, just the principle itself. What are you requiring that should be done that everyone will do, that has to be put to this test, that you believe that should be done?
I have one.
Okay, go on, Dominique.
Okay. I think everybody should be able to go to college for free.
I agree.
As long as you have as long as you sustain a certain GPA. And the reason I think this is because it's so many jobs that want you to have bachelor's degrees, but it's like when your financial aid money runs out, you can't, even for rich people. So what? It took them to have to, somebody had to climb on another person's back for them to be able to live a certain lifestyle.
Right, correct.
So when it comes down to schooling and education, to be a better world and society, education grants people knowledge. People become useless because they don't have knowledge in certain, tools and resources. So I think that that would be something that I would say should be like, everybody can do this, because what are you really, and then you don't necessarily maybe have to have all the extracurricular activities, but if that's something you choose to do, then you pay for that. But the education itself, I believe that should be free.
Yeah, because some of the classes you don't even be needing, to be honest.
So let's test this according to Kant's moral principle, the categorical in principle, the principle of fairness. I should not do what I'm not able to will that everyone do. So based upon your philosophy that everyone should be able to go to college, as long, because your imperative was that everyone should have a certain GPA. So what about people with learning disabilities?
I was going to ask that. What about the ones like that?
Well, I think the GPA can, be like that particular criteria can be adjusted to people with disability.
But what if everyone?
And the idea of like, okay.
So then you have to adjust your law.
Right.
Well, I still feel like, don't be like failing, because then it's just like you're just wasting your time. But I think it should be an option for people to go, because like the thing is, you don't want people to take advantage of the rule either. So like disability, like, okay, I understand that, but they can still learn and they can still, do the work because they have like their parent or, helping them, or, it's something that they choose to want to do. But if you're failing, then no, you can't
But the
continue to
curriculum
be in
has to fit
class.
them. The curriculum has to fit the person with the learning disability.
Yeah, so there should be
they have
classes that have, that take and work with the learning disability. Like they used to have, what's the class called?
They should be able to still get the same GPA, even though their curriculum is different from a regular course.
Yeah, because their curriculum will match what
they're learning. Now
basically,
that I agree, where it still would fit into what she says. I think.
Like when I was in school, they had like classes for people specifically with disability, because they learn at a different pace. So
Correct.
I wouldn't expect to put someone with a learning disability, unless they choose that that's what they want to do, because I never will want them to feel like, well, you have to go in this class because you have this. But if I wouldn't expect them to be taught at the same level of someone that doesn't have a learning disability, because then that would be unfair and unfit.
Once again, so you get back to the principle of fairness that Kant talks about. And this is the problem with the categorical imperative, because as you see, as I could throw so many more scenarios at you that would isolate your rationale for why everyone should go to college if they have a certain GPA, because I could give you all kinds of scenarios as to why people would not have that GPA. And then somehow you're taking away the principle of fairness, because you're saying, according to Kant, I should not do what I'm not able to will that everyone do. Because can you will that everyone do the same thing that you do if you have a student who has been in perpetual homelessness their entire academic career?
I have one. Well, I wanted to.
Well, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, if you want something, you're going to go after it.
In perpetual homelessness.
What's the in perpetual part?
Perpetual meaning that you have not been in a stable environment, a stable school for your entire academic career.
Well, you shouldn't be in school then, because you can't focus on school. Do it when you can focus on it. It's free. Why you like no need to like?
I'm
No.
talking about from high school, elementary school, because of family situation. You know that there is a great population of homeless people who they're not homeless because they're out on the street. They're homeless because they have to move from place to place to place.
I did that. I moved every 3 years, and I still did good in school because my parents were still on me, and it's like a choice. But I'm just now going to college for real, and I'm about to be 30. So it's like when my life settled down, and even still, like you get bumps in the road, but like you either gonna have to take a break or whatever. Like if you want to go to school for free, like there's gonna have to be some type of stipulation on that, because then everybody just gonna come waste a person's time, and we ain't doing that. That's not why we're offering the program.
Understood. Again, the principle of fairness, according to Kant's moral theory and his categorical imperative, I should not do what I am not able to will that everyone do.
I got it. I got it. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Mhm. I
ahead.
think you got it, Yasmin. Think about it again, Dominique. Look at it very, very, look at it
I
again.
shouldn't do what I'm not able to will that everyone do. Because they can't do good in school, I shouldn't say that that's the only way they can get free school.
Mhm.
Get somebody else to do it.
This is Kant's categorical imperative for
But
how
that's not,
you,
no.
this is how you test your universal maxim. This is Kant's theory. Remember, we're talking about his theory. By maxim, the description is, I have to put this action or this policy that you're putting in place to the test, right? And I have to formulate it by some maximal rule that whether or not I could will that everyone could follow that maxim. Because the first form of Kant's
So they would have to have a good GPA?
It requires universally one's contemplated action or policy.
But some people just not smart. That doesn't mean I'm like, I don't know. I guess that's how I was raised. It's like if you want something bad enough, like you're gonna go and get it. No matter if you're stressed out, like no matter like what it takes, it's like, no, I gotta get it. So I can be like in a better situation. But I get what he's saying, but no, throw his stuff out the window. Because it's nothing in the world that is like, even murder. Like if you kill one of my loved ones and we come back and try to kill you, like I don't think you should get the same amount of time for somebody that's just maliciously out here killing people, So it's just like, it's nothing in the world that I could see where like everybody gonna be on the same exact page.
Okay.
It's a whole lot of chiefs and not enough Indians too.
Okay. Well, that's his empirical law. The second form that he has is that we are asked to consider what constitute proper treatment of persons according to Kant. So one key characteristics of his persons is their ability to set their own goals. Persons, remember, this is this idea of autonomy, very different than universalism, and the idea that utility or that which we were looking for in ethical relativism or even in utilitarianism. He believes that persons are autonomous and they are literally self-ruled, or at least capable of being self-ruled. And as persons, we choose our own life plans, our friends, etc. And Kant's statements from the second form of the categorical imperative follows this, that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or that of another, never simply as a means, but always at the same time as an end, which is different than utilitarianism, which we talked about last week, that talks about the means that justify the ends. You know, people, according to Kant, are valuable, regardless of whether they are useful, Dominique, or loved, or valued by others. We should not simply use others or let others be used. That's that second form.
No, ma'am.
Right.
No, because at the end of the day, when you want to work a job, they're looking for certain skill. You can't be a professor at Generations College without some type of skill to be able to train us, to set us up. Otherwise, everybody gonna be set up for failure. That doesn't mean you're not valuable and like to the people you love, but you're useless at the job you're trying to get.
I love you, Dominique. I tell you, I have enjoyed you.
Thank you.
I'm enjoying you too, Dominique.
Thank you.
Kant would disagree with you. And he would say in the second form, you cannot come to this conclusion without looking at this form of how we treat people in their autonomy. And that is why there are issues that follow up with Kant. So I'm going to stop here. We're going to have to dig into next week, and we'll finish up Kant next week. Which means that I'm going to give you guys a break on turning in the assignment for this week. I'm going to give you guys an extension for that because we just didn't have a chance to finish. And we'll finish it at the beginning of Tuesday, and then we'll get right into our lecture. And I'll make sure that you have everything that you all need for the following week. Okay.
Yes.
So
Okay.
if anything, what's due on Tuesday now?
Just the quiz
And the
and
bonus
if
question?
you all wanted to do the extra credit assignment.
Okay, so that's it. That's the only thing due on Tuesday.
Mhm.
Okay,
I'm going
perfect.
to extend this because we didn't get a chance to talk anything about Kant on Tuesday because we went over everything that we needed to
Yeah.
talk about for the quiz. And we didn't get a chance to finish the Kant philosophy today. And I definitely want to give you guys an opportunity to do that. So I'm going to extend that time. All right.
Quick question.